Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very, very much for being here, one and all. I appreciate your willingness to share in the end of this campaign, as many of you shared in the beginning of this campaign. When I declared my candidacy 10 months and about 1 million miles ago, I had one goal in view above all: to restore the Democratic Party to its best and truest traditions. I have done my best in this campaign to reclaim a heritage once neglected. And I have done my best, as time went on, not only to reclaim, but to update it. I have drawn freshly in that effort from our roots, from a diplomacy based upon strength, from an economy that creates wealth before spending it, and from a society that makes room for all its people. Things didn't work out exactly the way I had planned, and now I know how a lot of folks in America feel. I was doing great until I turned 40. I lost this race, and that is a disappointment. But some things matter to me more than winning: helping my party, serving my country, knowing when to keep fighting, and knowing when I've been licked. I will not be the Democratic nominee for president in 1988. The nominee is going to be Mike Dukakis or Jesse Jackson. I'm going to do everything I can to help them do what I set out to do, and that is to put a Democrat in the White House this November. We're going to do it. I will no longer campaign in the hope of winning the nomination. The nominee is going to be and ought to be one of these two men. Technically, I shall remain a candidate for the nomination, but only to enable my delegates to go to the convention so they can represent our point of view in our party's deliberations. I want no part of a Stop Jackson or Stop Dukakis movement. The only man I want to stop is George Bush, and we're going to stop George Bush. Although we did not win, we can be proud of what we did accomplish. A campaign is more than one man's pursuit of office. It is a cause. We set out to move the Democratic Party toward the center of American political thought. We also spoke out for a new democratic foreign policy based on standing up for American principles in the world and standing by America's friends. Our cause can be posed as a question: will Democrats speak again, as we once did, for a majority of our countrymen and women, or are we destined to wander in dissent? We've been subjected for 8 years to a Republican who quotes our heroes against us. But Franklin Delano Roosevelt does not belong to a man who cannot even see the homeless on our streets. Harry Truman does not belong to an administration that passes the buck for their mistakes. John Fitzgerald Kennedy. That's my number one cheerleader. John Fitzgerald Kennedy does not belong to a president whose employees and friends have corrupted the very idea of public service. And not a single one of those Democratic heroes belongs to an administration whose $1 trillion of new debt, all of which will come due for our children and grandchildren, marks the most selfish generation of leadership in all of American history. It's time we reclaimed our heroes. It's time we reclaimed our party. It's time we reclaimed the values we have stood for at our best, and it's time we brought those values to the White House. It hurts to have come so far and fallen short, but there will be other days for me and for the causes that matter to us. When I look back on this race, I will remember what I learned from this campaign and from my opponents. For at their best, they taught me a great deal. From Gary Hart, I learned that ideas matter and can bring people back into politics. All of us in this campaign were enriched by proposals put forth by Senator Gary Hart. From Joe Biden, I learned the importance of grace under pressure. When his campaign was unraveling around him, I saw him conduct the Bork hearings with absolute fairness and honor. Joe Biden put the country ahead of his own political struggles and honored us all as Democrats and as Americans. From Bruce Babbitt, I learned that virtue can be its own reward. Bruce Babbitt cared less about what people thought than about being true to his principles. That kind of courage is rare and sustains us all. From Dick Gephardt, I learned that passion in the service of policy is powerful indeed. Dick tapped into people's basic emotions about their futures with an eloquence and energy that Democrats will need to renew. From Mike Dukakis, I learned that after 8 years of Reagan and Bush, competence is charisma in the eyes of Americans hungry for leadership. Mike Dukakis has run a campaign that Democrats can be proud of. He brings a record of achievement to this race that few Democrats and no Republicans can match. And finally, from my friend Jesse Jackson, I learned again 2 old lessons. First, we are a richer party and a better nation when we break down barriers and fight for justice. And second, as Theodore Roosevelt first noted when he spoke about the bully pulpit, a successful president must be both a chief executive and a preacher. These candidates, my friends all, are the best teachers in the world and among the best Americans any of us will ever meet. They are what make the Democratic Party the best hope for the future of our country. Most important of all, I have learned from the many thousands of volunteers and campaign workers who have been a part of this cause the true meaning of Shakespeare's words, "I count myself in nothing else so happy as in a soul remembering my good friends." This has been a very special campaign. At the conclusion of this campaign, I want to express my thanks to all who have been a meaningful part of this campaign. so many millions of Americans. I want to say a special word about someone who has campaigned just as tirelessly as I have, and who has inspired many millions of Americans to see in public service the commitment to the future of our children that it is at its best. I'd like to thank my wife, Tipper. And I'd like to thank two individuals who have campaigned harder with greater effect than anybody else in this campaign in convincing people to think some more and vote for Gore, my father and mother, Albert and Pauline Gore. Harry Reid gave us a newspaper article from Nevada that said, Senator Gore has been here 3 times, Tipper Gore has been here twice, his father, Albert Gore Sr., has been here, his mother, Pauline Gore, has been here. We're expecting the pets of the family next. I would like to also thank 4 people who have understood and shared in this whole campaign. My children, who are really pretty excited that I'm going to be home a lot more. I want to thank those of my colleagues in the House and Senate who have stood by me so steadfastly. I want to thank the contributors and those who have run as delegates. I want to thank the volunteers, as I mentioned them a moment ago, and the greatest campaign staff headed by our manager, Fred Martin, and our finance chairman, Johnny Hayes, for doing an absolutely outstanding job. I'm grateful to them beyond words. In closing, let me say that in 1988, our cause has been to return the Democratic Party to its roots, to put the White House back on the side of working families, and to once again stand up for a strong and intelligent American role in the world. Our cause has been to speak out for a new American majority and elect a Democratic president in the fall. Our campaign did not win in 1988, but our cause will, and we are going to elect a Democrat this November. Thank you all very much for being a part of it. Thank you. Thank you. I'll be happy to respond to any questions that you might
Remember the
have.
excitement to endorse one of the two remaining candidates in the field. If so, when?
I have no plans to endorse one of the two remaining candidates. One of either Mike Dukakis or Jesse Jackson. I can always reevaluate that decision at a later time. I have no present plans to endorse before the convention.
Senator, will you run again?
Excuse me?
Will you run again another year?
Oh, I don't know.
Senator, many people think the Democrats need a Southerner on the ticket if they expect to win in the fall. You are a Southerner. Would you be interested in running for vice president if asked by the nominee?
Well, I said from the outset of this campaign that I have no interest in the vice presidential nomination. I did not get into this race to pursue the vice presidency, and I still have no interest in it. I think, incidentally, that George Bush is going to prove again this fall that that is a political dead end, and I'm not interested in trying to fill his topsiders.
So would you? Would you run if asked? Would you run if asked?
I have no interest in the vice presidential
Would you turn
nomination.
it down?
I have said in the past that I think it's arrogant for anyone to say that regardless of what situation prevailed, they would absolutely, under any circumstances, do that. But I genuinely and sincerely have no interest in it. I've said that from the beginning. I say that now, and I mean that now.
Do you think the number two person should be vice presidential nominee? It would be Jesse Jackson if Dukakis wins the nomination.
The person who receives the vice presidential nomination should be the person selected by the nominee.
And comes in number two.
The person who receives the presidential nomination should have a free hand in selecting the man or woman of his choosing as his vice presidential running mate.
Does the ticket need a Southerner?
Excuse me?
Does the ticket need a Southerner in the number two slot?
That will be for the presidential nominee to determine. The history of electoral politics in this century indicates that independently thinking voters who are found in abundance in the South hold the balance of power in the Electoral College. Regardless of where the nominee for the second spot on the ticket comes from, I suspect that our presidential nominee will conclude that that person must be someone who can reach out and appeal to independently thinking voters and assist the ticket's chances of winning in November.
Senator Gore, many of us remember that exciting day last year, the bold, fresh, young leader coming in with a vision for America that all Americans can share. You did extremely well Super Tuesday, and then your message of hope and optimism seemed to be replaced.
There's a long premise to this question.
But it seemed to me all we ever heard about was that the political bit of bickering, the infighting. What happened? How did that message get lost in all of this?
Well, my father was interviewed by a newspaper recently. I read the clipping from our clipping service. I haven't talked to him about it, but he had just completed bragging on me, which he's very good at. And the questioner said, well, in light of all of his virtues, why isn't he getting more votes? And he reflected on it a moment, according to the newspaper story, and looked at the questioner and said, "You know, it is a complete mystery to me." I think the main reason must be the credit due to the other candidates in this race. Mike Dukakis and Jesse Jackson are extremely able campaigners. They have put together campaigns and groups of people enthusiastic about their candidacies that have proven to be formidable enterprises, and I congratulate both of them on how well they have done.
Has Mayor Koch damaged you black voters in your constituency, in your home state of Tennessee? And what do you think of Mayor Koch? Was he an asset to you during this campaign?
Well, I was proud to have his support and honored by his friendship. I said on several occasions during the remaining days of the New York campaign that he was speaking for himself in some of the statements made, but I will repeat again that I appreciate his friendship and support. And he himself said that he felt that some of his statements were not helpful. I don't know how to analyze the exit polls or the results of that particular primary. That is a level of political analysis that's above my pay grade.
What about Tennessee, Senator? Is that
What about Tennessee? Well,
will there be a connection made?
I am honored to have the opportunity to serve the people of Tennessee, and I look forward to continuing that. If your question is, what about black voters in Tennessee? I have received in every election that I have run in Tennessee the same percentage, approximately the same percentage of the black vote that Jesse Jackson received in the New York primary. I have had a very strong relationship and friendship with the black voters in Tennessee based upon my record of 100% support for civil rights legislation and causes during my 12 years in the Senate and House, and because of the leadership I have tried to provide in breaking down barriers and changing the way people think about prejudice. And I plan to continue that effort.
Rather than withdrawing, and how difficult was that decision?
Well, let me speak to that just for a moment. There are three categories of delegates, and a lot of people don't understand the details of the process. Most people are like me. They know generally what it's like until they have to, for some reason, familiarize themselves with all the details, as I've done over the last few days. There are three categories of delegates, generally speaking. There are district delegates that are identified, named, and locked in at the time of the election in a given state. We have roughly 490 delegates altogether, which includes superdelegates, not all of whom have publicly committed. But in that first category of district delegates, we have approximately 225. Their trip to the convention and ability to influence the platform would not be affected one way or the other by a withdrawal or a suspension. The second category is made up of the superdelegates, about 100 of whom are committed to me or thereabouts. Their trip to the convention and ability to influence the platform will likewise be unaffected by either a withdrawal or a suspension. The third category is affected. That is a group of at-large delegates apportioned to candidates that break a threshold, that is a 15% threshold of support in a state where delegates are selected. Now, among these at-large delegates, some of them have already been chosen, identified, and locked in also. In Tennessee, for example, all of the at-large delegates have already been named, and there would be no impact on who the delegates are or on how they vote as a result of either withdrawing or suspending. In a number of states, including Georgia, where you're from, there are around 78 at-large and elected official delegates in the category that has not yet been chosen. Now, if a withdrawal would mean that those individuals who've worked hard in my behalf and in behalf of the cause we have sought to represent would not be able to express their viewpoints in the deliberations at the convention. Now, if a withdrawal rather than a suspension would mean that all of those delegates would be apportioned to other candidates. Let me make one point very clearly here. Unlike the situation that existed in Illinois when Paul Simon suspended his campaign, neither Jesse Jackson nor Mike Dukakis would benefit in their contest one with another from a decision by me to withdraw rather than suspend. That is because the delegates would be apportioned almost exactly evenly between the two of them. I consulted both with Jesse Jackson and with Mike Dukakis in advance of making that particular decision. And both of them said they're quite comfortable with this route of allowing these delegates to remain in place.
Last question.
Well, do we have time for a few more, Arlie? There may be some. Yeah.
Jesse Jackson, did you in any way further in your conversation with him disassociate yourself from some of the remarks that Mayor Cox made about him while campaigning at your side in New York?
Well, I said on numerous occasions that he spoke for himself. And I have repeated that frequently enough that I hope the message there is clear. But I honor the friendship I share with him, and I am grateful for his support.
One strategy question, Senator. Do you think that Gore's strategy of avoiding Iowa work, would you recommend anyone else following that strategy?
Well, the message and the cause are far more important than the strategy or the tactics, and I have concentrated on the former rather than the latter.
But did the Southern strategy paint you as too narrow a candidate, too conservative, too regional to be elected outside the South?
No, I don't think so at all. I think that the campaigns of Jesse Jackson and Mike Dukakis were just extremely well put together. We fought a hard, long battle, and they did better than we did. It's just that simple. They did an outstanding job. Yeah.
You try to control that mob down this convention, and if so, for what purpose? The platform, or to put somebody over the top?
I have no. I've said here. I am not trying in any way to broker a convention that is not going to be brokered in any event. I think that's increasingly obvious. As I've said, it wouldn't be brokered from the beginning. I had a slightly different scenario in mind as to how it wouldn't be brokered, but I have no desire to be a broker in the convention. Those delegates and volunteers and campaign workers who have fought alongside me for a cause deserve the right to press their arguments in behalf of that cause in order to shape the future of the Democratic Party and our approach to the country. And I think that's extremely constructive, incidentally, and likely to greatly to further increase our chances of reaching out to a majority of the Electoral College in November.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you all very much. Appreciate it. And thank you all very much.
watching a news conference held today by Senator Albert Gore Jr. to discuss the status of his campaign for the Democratic presidential nomination. This program will re-air on C-SPAN tomorrow morning at approximately 6:50 a.m. Eastern Time. That's 3:50 on the West Coast.
Join C-SPAN Sundays during April.